What do you consider your biggest stressor in life? A pioneering Hungarian-Canadian endocrinologist, often referred to as the father of stress management, Dr. Hans Selye, reportedly was the first researcher to demonstrate the existence of responses by a biological organism to a stimulus. Selye eventually borrowed the descriptive word stress from the field of engineering and applied it to human beings. He used it to describe the physical, mental, and emotional responses by the brain and body to an uncomfortable stimulus, internally or externally. The brain is the first body organ to perceive a stressor, because everything begins in the brain. In a nanosecond, 1/1000th of a second, the brain can trigger the stress response to anything it thinks is a challenge, a threat, or a barrier, whether real or imagined. Once triggered, it can take up to 72 hours for the brain and body and its hormones, neurotransmitters, and other chemicals to return to homeostasis, or balance. Longer than 72 hours if you keep rehearsing the event internally to yourself or externally to anyone who will listen. Most people are now familiar with the three main categories of stressors. Here's a quick review. Eustress is positive stress that helps you grow, as long as you are participating in the decision. Eustress can include going back to school for more education, getting married or partnered, starting a new job, having children, and so on. Distress is outright negative stress that is best avoided if at all possible. Examples of distress for males include work issues, unemployment, being fired, bankruptcy, separation, and interestingly, divorce. For females, distress includes conflict, serious illness, separation, and death within their proximal network. Mistress, spelled MISSTRESS, is the third general category, and it involves hidden stress that often goes unrecognized and unaddressed. Mistress can be as impactful as outright distress. Examples include long commutes, many hours sitting at a desk or in a vehicle, with insufficient exercise, sleep deprivation, dehydration, low-quality foods, and so on. Fewer realize that studies have shown how the brain responds differently to stressors based on gender. In an attempt to investigate possible cerebral underpinnings for this male-female difference, scientists turned to studies with rodents. Rats make good research subjects because even under a high-powered microscope, it's difficult to tell the difference between a rat brain neuron and a human brain neuron. In addition, rats and humans share at least 30 similar brain neuropeptides, chemicals that impact mood. I sometimes joke that if someone calls you a rat, that could be interpreted as a compliment, especially in the light of the fact that it appears the average rat can beat the average human, if not all humans, when it comes to learning a complex maze. When the brain recognizes a stressor and initiates the stress response, corticotropin releasing factor, or CRF for short, a powerful combination neurotransmitter and hormone, is released. In the male rat brain, a special mechanism inside the neuron or thinking cell involving arrestins allows only half as much CRF to pass through receptor molecules, so the stressor doesn't seem so bad. This special mechanism appears not to exist in the female brain, so CRF can freely flood into the cell through receptor molecules, making the stressor seem much worse. In a generalization, males tend to underreact to stressors, while females tend to overreact. According to researcher Deborah Bangasser, PhD, the female alarm system is more sensitive to stressors and to CRF, period, even in the absence of stressors. The female stress signaling system is more sensitive from the start. Other data suggested that although male brains appear to struggle less with stress in the present moment, meaning they tend to underreact, they may be at an increased risk of a stress-related major depressive disorder later in life. To investigate this, researchers at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, studied stressful life events and the risk of a major depressive episode 25 years later. The data were broken out by gender and by race. They identified no difference in the risk of a major depressive episode based on race for females. Possible contributors suggested were that females tend to use coping strategies, such as relational connections, faith, social support networks, spirituality and/or religion, and verbal and emotional expression. Researchers did identify a stronger predictive role of stressful life events and the risk of a major depressive event or episode 25 years later for white males compared with black males, dubbed the black-white paradox. Researchers found that despite higher levels of exposure to stressful life events, black males showed a disproportionately lower risk for a major depressive event and lower rates of depression. Suggested contributors included a higher tendency for black males to implement adaptive coping strategies, including positive reappraisal and maintenance of hope and optimism. So, when a non-black male experiences a major depressive episode, some have suggested, take a look at the black culture. Find out what those guys are doing that you are not doing. The researchers reportedly plan to replicate that study with other races, including Asians and perhaps Native Americans. How might you apply these findings to your own life? Well, first, recognize any tendency on your part either to underreact or overreact to a stressor. Study what the other gender does well and implement a version that works for you. Collaborate with each other to find middle ground and help each other learn healthier responses and strategies. Realize that increased knowledge, when practically applied, can result in enhanced and more positive communication. By all means, avoid making disparaging remarks related to gender differences. Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius is said to have believed that when you are stressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your own estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Doc Childer of the Heart Math Institute, has pointed out that the amount of stress you experience is based more on your perception rather than on the person, place, thing, or situation. The 2nd century Greek philosopher Epictetus taught that it's not so much what happens that matters as what you think about what happens. Now often referred to as the 20/80 rule, estimates are that only 20% of the negative impact to your brain and body relates to the event, while 80% involves the weight you give to it and the importance you place upon it. When your brain recognizes a stressor, ask yourself, what is it that I find distressing about this? How do my perceptions play into the level of distress I'm experiencing? Once you identify the 20%, person, place, thing, or situation, and its validity, is it real or only imagined? This frees you to address the 80%. You can do almost everything with that 80% because your brain creates your perceptions. Stress is both a subjective and a relative concept. According to Dr. Al Siebert, no stress exists in any situation unless an individual human brain perceives something as a stressor and experiences strain. The resulting stress is less from what actually occurs or exists objectively, and far more because of the way in which your brain perceives what is happening. It's reminiscent of an old saying, one person's pleasure is another person's pain. Do you tend to create distress by continually comparing yourself against others? Be careful with that. It can be deadly, like trying to compare apples with oranges. Especially since each brain on the planet is unique, and no one brain can do it all. Do you try to turn almost everything into a competition? You may want to evaluate what's driving that need. Remember, it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. Whatever you do, avoid meaningless controversy and foolish arguments. Argument stress suppresses your immune system. Anger or fear downshifts your brain, directing energy and attention away from the conscious part of your brain to the first and second subconscious layers of the brain, which can be quite reactive. If you have a fixed, stress is harmful mindset, you are more likely to attempt to alter your feelings instead of addressing the root cause of the perceived stressor, which can lead to addictive behaviors. If you have a growth, stress can be handled mindset, you are more likely to manage your perceptions and the 80% of the 20/80 rule, which can provide a significant reduction in perceived stress. To recap, stress reactions typically are learned in childhood, usually by the age of 5. If you observed healthy, functional role modeling, great. If not, you may have learned some unhealthy reactions and be stressing your immune system needlessly. In adulthood, many still react to stressors based on what they saw role modeled in childhood and experienced personally. The secretion of stress chemicals and hormones can suppress the immune system and contribute to illness, disease, and a shortened lifespan. When your brain and body are flooded with stress chemicals unnecessarily, you hurt yourself the most. Therefore, it is important to avoid triggering the stress response unless it is needed for safety. Develop solid stress management strategies and implement them consistently. Success lies in how you perceive potential stressors, your degree of flexibility, and your level of EQ skills. The good news, the great news, is that you can learn healthier responses as needed. Stress management matters.